The newly hired nanny gifted the millionaire couple's daughter a teddy bear. Weeks later, the parents were horrified when they checked the security cameras. The Blackwood mansion, imposing and silent, awaited the arrival of Vanessa, the new nanny. Theodore Blackwood, a middle-aged man with piercing eyes and graying hair, nervously adjusted his tie while his wife, Evelyn, an elegant woman with brown hair and a warm smile, arranged the sofa cushions for the third time. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, making Evelyn jump. Theodore opened the door, revealing Vanessa, a young woman with an impeccable appearance, perfectly styled black hair, and intense green eyes. She smiled politely, extending her hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, it's a pleasure to meet you in person. I hope I haven't arrived too early," Vanessa said, her voice soft but confident. "And not at all. In fact, your punctuality is admirable," Theodore replied, guiding her to the living room. As the adults settled in, Ethan, the Blackwoods' eldest son, observed the scene from the top of the stairs. His freckled face was furrowed in an expression of distrust, his blue eyes fixed on Vanessa. He couldn't explain it, but something about her deeply bothered him. Maybe it was the way her smile never seemed to reach her eyes, or how her movements were too calculated. Ethan slowly descended the stairs, making sure each step was heard. Something's wrong with her. Why does she seem so perfect? No one is like that in real life, Ethan thought, his stomach churning. "Oh, this must be Ethan," Vanessa said, turning to the boy with a smile that he found far too artificial. "Hello. You know we don't need a nanny, right?" "I can take care of Zoe," Ethan responded dryly, crossing his arms. Theodore gave his son a warning look, but Vanessa just laughed softly. She began to talk about her qualifications, her experience with children of all ages, and her passion for education. The Blackwoods listened, impressed, while Ethan rolled his eyes, unconvinced. Vanessa spoke eloquently, her words carefully chosen to captivate the parents. How can she have so much experience at such a young age? She doesn't seem much older than a college student, Ethan wondered, frowning. The conversation continued, with Vanessa skillfully answering all of the Blackwoods' questions. She talked about her background in child psychology, her previous experiences with high-profile families, and even her hobby of photography. Ethan noticed how his parents seemed increasingly charmed, almost hypnotized by Vanessa's words. He wanted to shout, to tell them that something was wrong, but he knew it would be useless. Twice, why can't my parents see through this facade? It's like she has cast some kind of spell on them, Ethan thought, feeling more and more frustrated. Then Vanessa saw the photo of Zoe on the mantelpiece. The 5-year-old girl was smiling brightly, her golden curls framing an angelic face. For a moment, something changed in Vanessa's gaze. A mysterious smile appeared on her lips, so quickly that only Ethan noticed. It was a smile that made his stomach turn, a smile that promised something he couldn't decipher but knew wasn't good. That smile. Why did she look at Zoe's picture that way? I have to keep an eye on her. I can't leave Zoe alone with this woman, Ethan shuddered internally. But despite Ethan's suspicions, the parents decided to hire Vanessa as the nanny. On her first day of work at the Blackwood mansion, the new hire arrived with a mix of expectation and apprehension. She walked through the gates with confident steps, carrying an elegant leather bag and a package wrapped in colorful paper. Zoe, eager to meet her new nanny, was hopping from foot to foot at the entrance, while Ethan watched from a distance, his eyes never leaving Vanessa. The nanny knelt in front of Zoe, her smile radiant as she handed the package to the little girl. "Hello, Zoe. I'm Vanessa, your new nanny. I brought something special for you." "I hope we can be great friends," Vanessa said, her voice sweet as honey. Zoe tore open the paper excitedly, revealing an innocent-looking brown teddy bear. "Oh, he's so cute." "Thank you, Vanessa." Throughout the day, Vanessa captivated Zoe with games and stories and creative activities. The teddy bear was always close by and involved in the play. Ethan tried to intervene, suggesting other toys or activities, but Zoe was completely enchanted with her new nanny and the gift. During lunch, Ethan finally found an opportunity to talk to his parents alone, taking advantage of the moment when Vanessa was helping Zoe wash her hands. "Swan, Dad, don't you think it's strange that she gave Zoe a gift on the first day? Doesn't it seem, I don't know, kind of manipulative?" I think it's too soon to hire her and let her stay in the house next to the mansion. I don't think she's trustworthy to be around us. There's something wrong with her, Ethan whispered, casting nervous glances toward the door. Theodore sighed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Ethan, I understand your concern, but Vanessa is just trying to bond with your sister. There's nothing wrong with that. She has great references and qualifications. We have to trust her, my son, so, his father replied. As the afternoon progressed, Ethan's anxiety grew. He watched every move Vanessa made, every smile, every gentle touch on Zoe or the teddy bear. When dinner was over, and it was time for Zoe to go to bed, Ethan made one last desperate attempt to separate his sister from the toy. He entered Zoe's room while Vanessa was tidying up the kitchen, finding his sister hugging the teddy bear. Hey Zoe, how about sleeping with Mr. Fluffy tonight? You don't want your new teddy bear to get jealous, do you? Ethan said, trying to sound casual. Zoe clutched the teddy bear to her chest, frowning. No, I want to sleep with Teddy. Vanessa said he will protect me from nightmares, the little girl replied. Night fell over the Blackwood mansion, enveloping it in shadows and silence. Zoe and Ethan's parents had retired, exhausted after a long day. Ethan resisted sleep as long as he could, determined to keep watch, but eventually succumbed to exhaustion. In Zoe's room, the little girl slept soundly, the teddy bear nestled in her arms. The clock struck 3 in the morning, when a faint red light, almost imperceptible, flickered in the teddy bear's eyes. Zoe stirred in her sleep, her eyes slowly opening. She blinked, confused, staring at the teddy bear. Teddy, are your eyes glowing? She mumbled sleepily. The red LED light flickered again, as if answering Zoe's question. The little girl smiled, hugging the teddy bear tighter. You're magical, she whispered, drifting back to sleep, unaware of the sinister meaning behind that red glow in the darkness. The next day, breakfast at the Blackwood mansion started like any other day, but it soon took an unexpected turn. Zoe came running down the stairs, her golden curls bouncing with each step. The teddy bear firmly clutched in her arms. Her eyes shone with an almost feverish excitement as she sat at the table, completely ignoring her favorite cereal. Ethan watched his sister with growing concern, noticing how she whispered to the teddy bear and looked at the empty corners of the room. Mom, Dad, you won't believe it. I have a new friend. He came to visit me last night, Zoe suddenly exclaimed, and her voice overflowing with joy. Ethan froze, his spoon suspended in the air. A friend? What friend, Zoe? He asked. The parents exchanged confused looks as Zoe continued, excitedly describing her invisible friend. She talked about how funny he was, how he had told wonderful stories, and promised to come back every night. Theodore and Evelyn listened with expressions that ranged from amusement to concern, while Ethan felt his stomach sink deeper and deeper. Vanessa, who had arrived in the middle of Zoe's story, maintained a serene smile as if the situation were perfectly normal. Say, sweetie, are you sure it wasn't just a dream? Evelyn asked gently, stroking Zoe's hair. Zoe shook her head vehemently. No, Mommy. He was real. Teddy saw him too, didn't you, Teddy? She asked the teddy bear. Lunch passed in an atmosphere of palpable tension. The nanny seemed strangely calm, helping Zoe with her lunch and listening attentively to her stories about the invisible friend. When Vanessa took Zoe for an afternoon nap, Ethan took the opportunity to approach his parents. Don't you think this is strange? Zoe has never had an imaginary friend before. And why did it start now? He whispered urgently. Theodore frowned, running his hand through his graying hair. Maybe it's just a phase, son. Children have vivid imagination, he replied. The argument between the parents intensified throughout the afternoon. Evelyn, visibly worried, insisted that they should consult a child psychologist, arguing that Zoe's behavior was unusual and potentially concerning. Theodore, on the other hand, remained firm in his position that it was just a passing phase, fearing that a psychological consultation could stigmatize Zoe or create problems where none existed. Careful, India, you're overreacting, dear. All children go through phases like this. We can't rush to a psychologist every time Zoe does something unexpected, Theodore said, exasperated. Evelyn shook her head, frustrated. But what if it's something more serious, Theodore? What if we're ignoring important signs? She asked, visibly concerned. While his parents argued, Ethan decided to take matters into his own hands. Taking advantage of a moment when everyone was distracted, he sneaked into his father's office, where the security camera monitor was located. With trembling fingers, he navigated through the recordings from the previous night, focusing on the camera in Zoe's room. His heart raced as he reached 3 in the morning. There on the black and white screen, he saw something that made his blood run cold. An adult silhouette, undefined by the shadows but unmistakable, moving silently through his sister's room. It can't be. Someone's entering Zoe's room at night. But who? And how? Ethan murmured, his eyes wide with horror. With his heart pounding and hands shaking, Ethan burst into the living room where his parents were relaxing after dinner. His wide eyes and labored breathing immediately caught the attention of Theodore and Evelyn. He was holding a tablet in his hands, gripping the edges so tightly that his knuckles were white. "Mum, Dad, you need to see this right now," Ethan exclaimed, his voice a mixture of urgency and fear. He approached quickly, almost tripping on the rug in his haste. Theodore straightened in his chair, his forehead creased with concern. "Go, Ethan, what's going on?" "Calm down and explain to us," he requested. Ignoring his father's plea to calm down, Ethan practically shoved the tablet into their hands. "I checked the security cameras in Zoe's room. Look at what I found at 3 in the morning." Evelyn and Theodore leaned over the tablet, watching intently as Ethan played the video. As the shadowy silhouette appeared on the screen, moving silently through Zoe's room, their expressions changed from confusion to shock and then to horror. "Oh my God, that's..." Evelyn gasped, her hand flying up to cover her mouth. "Someone entered Zoe's room during the night. And I'm almost sure I know who it is," Ethan added, his voice trembling slightly. Theodore, his face pale, looked at his son with a mix of fear and determination. "Show us everything, Ethan. We need to get to the bottom of this right now." "I knew something was wrong. Now they have to believe me," Ethan thought, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension as his parents examined the video more closely. Theodore, with skillful fingers, manipulated the controls, adjusting the brightness and contrast. As the image became clearer, shock filled the room. The once undefined silhouette took shape, revealing the unmistakable outline of Vanessa. "Oh my God, it's her! What was she doing in Zoe's room in the middle of the night?" Evelyn exclaimed, bringing her hand to her mouth. Ethan felt a mix of validation and fear. "I knew something was wrong with her. We have to do something," Ethan said. The next day, with calmer minds, the Blackwoods decided to confront Vanessa about the incident. Prepared for the worst, they called her in for a serious conversation. However, Vanessa's response took them completely by surprise. I'm sorry for not mentioning it earlier. Zoe had a nightmare that night. I heard her crying and went to check on her. I didn't want to bother you, so I took care of her myself." She calmed down quickly and went back to sleep. "I didn't think it was worth worrying you about it," Vanessa explained, her face a mask of sincere concern. Her explanation was so plausible, her tone so genuine, that the Blackwoods found themselves questioning their own suspicions. Theodore and Evelyn exchanged guilty looks, while Ethan wrestled internally with doubt. We didn't know." "Thank you for taking care of her, Vanessa," Evelyn stammered, feeling embarrassed by her distrust. Theodore added with a forced smile, "Yes, we appreciate your dedication. So next time, please let us know even if it seems like something small," he said. "Of course," Vanessa replied with an understanding smile. "And I'm sorry if I caused any concern. When Zoe mentioned she had an imaginary friend that day, I assumed it was related to the nightmare she had. Children get scared by things like that," she explained with a smile. While his parents seemed relieved, Ethan couldn't shake the persistent feeling that something was still not right. How does she always have the perfect answer? This can't be a coincidence. She shouldn't be entering Zoe's room in the middle of the night, he thought, watching Vanessa with suspicious eyes. Days later, the Blackwoods hosted a charity dinner. They had been planning the event for months. The mansion was bustling with preparations. Vanessa mingled with the guests, her charm on full display. Ethan watched her from a distance, his eyes never losing sight of her, while his parents continued as usual, smiling and chatting with the guests. "I can't believe they're still trusting Vanessa and living as if nothing happened. Why don't they notice that she's hiding something?" Ethan thought, frustrated. At the height of the party, Elaine, the Blackwood's trusted cook, found a moment to pull Theodore aside. Her years of loyal service gave her a certain freedom to express concerns. In a low and urgent voice, she began to question Vanessa's references, mentioning inconsistencies she had noticed and expressing her distrust of the newly hired nanny. Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something about Vanessa that doesn't seem right to me. Did you check all her references? Something tells me she isn't who she says she is. She claimed to have worked at a mansion where I worked in the past, but I never saw her there. Isn't that strange? Elaine questioned, her eyes showing genuine concern. Theodore, still shaken by the recent conversation where he had wrongly doubted the nanny, was determined to maintain his trust in her. Elaine, I appreciate your concern, but we've already checked everything. Please focus on your tasks and leave these matters to us, he replied, more firmly than he intended. As the party continued downstairs, Theodore, restless and disturbed by Elaine's words, decided to set his worries aside and quickly check some documents in his office. Silently climbing the stairs, he approached the slightly open door. The soft sound of papers being handled made him pause. Cautiously, he peeked through the gap, his heart racing at what he saw. Vanessa was there, her back to the door, methodically photographing documents from his desk with a high-resolution camera. Theodore felt the blood freeze in his veins. My God, what is she doing? Who is this woman we let into our home? Frozen in shock, he watched Vanessa continue her work, completely unaware of his presence. Theodore's mind raced, trying to process the betrayal and decide his next move. Recovering from the initial shock, Theodore pushed the door open forcefully, making it slam against the wall. Vanessa spun around abruptly, the camera still in her hands, her eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, silence hung in the air, heavy and tense, broken only by the distant sound of the party downstairs. What the hell do you think you're doing? Theodore exploded, his voice trembling with contained rage. He moved towards the desk, his fists clenched at his sides. Theodore and Evelyn discussed quietly in the corner of the kitchen, while Ethan played distractedly with his food, his eyes never leaving Zoe and Vanessa. Vanessa, quickly recovering, forced a nervous smile. Mr. Blackwood, I can explain. I was just organizing some files. I thought it would be more efficient, she said nervously. Organizing? This is espionage, Vanessa. Who are you really? Why are you photographing my documents? Theodore interrupted, grabbing the camera from her hands. He quickly checked the recent photos, his face paling as he saw clear images of his family's confidential documents. He immediately began deleting all the images. Vanessa took a step back, her back pressed against the bookshelf. Mr. Blackwood, please, it's a misunderstanding. I just wanted to be efficient, to create a digital system for... She tried to say, but Theodore cut her off again, his voice now a low growl. Enough with the lies, get out of here right now. You're fired. Tomorrow morning I want you and your things out of this house, he said. As soon as Vanessa left the office with slumped shoulders, Theodore locked the door and plunged into a frantic investigation. He rummaged through files, made hurried phone calls, and checked the nanny's references. Each new discovery made his stomach sink further. Discrepancies in employment dates, references that didn't exist, a college degree that couldn't be verified. The puzzle that was forming was disturbing and terrifying. How were we so blind? We let a complete stranger into our lives to care for our daughter, Theodore murmured to himself, running his hands through his graying hair. At that moment, the door handle turned, followed by insistent knocking. Theodore. Theodore, open this door right now. Evelyn's voice rang out, a mix of concern and irritation. Reluctantly, Theodore unlocked the door. Evelyn burst in like a hurricane, her eyes flashing with anger. What is going on? The guests are asking for you, and I find Vanessa crying on the stairs. Why did you fire her? She demanded. Theodore took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Evelyn, sit down. We have a serious problem. He began to explain his discoveries, showing the evidence he had gathered. But to his surprise and frustration, Evelyn refused to believe him. Theodore, you're being ridiculous. Vanessa has been wonderful with Zoe. How can you accuse her based on assumptions? She might have been telling the truth. Maybe she really was trying to digitize files, she retorted, her tone hesitant. "Oh, these aren't assumptions, Aunt Evelyn. They're facts. Look at these inconsistencies." "Something is very wrong here," Theodore exclaimed, slamming his fist on the desk. The argument quickly escalated, their voices rising with each second. Accusations and counter-accusations flew across the room, years of unresolved tension coming to the surface. "Now you've always been paranoid, Theodore. Always seeing enemies where there are none," Evelyn shouted, tears of frustration in her eyes. Theodore was about to respond when a sharp scream cut through the air, silencing them instantly. Exchanging looks of terror, they rushed out of the office, running down the stairs toward Zoe's room. The scene they found froze their hearts. Elaine was lying on the floor, a trickle of blood running down her forehead. The room was in chaos, drawers open, toys scattered everywhere. And Zoe was nowhere to be seen, nor was Vanessa. Zoe! My God, Theodore, where is our daughter?" Evelyn screamed, panic gripping her voice. Theodore, his face pale with shock and guilt, could only manage to murmur, I don't know, dear. We have to find her." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Evelyn's sobs and the distant sound of the party continuing, unaware of the tragedy unfolding above. The realization of the danger they had placed their daughter in fell upon them like an avalanche, leaving them paralyzed with fear and regret. After leaving Ethan with Elaine, who was still unconscious, Theodore and Evelyn, their faces pale and hearts racing, ran down the stairs, their eyes frantically scanning every corner of the party for a glimpse of Zoe's golden hair. Panic spread through the Blackwood mansion like wildfire. Elegantly dressed guests turned to watch the couple, confused by the sudden commotion. Theodore, trying to maintain composure, approached groups of guests, asking if anyone had seen Zoe. Evelyn, on the other hand, ran from room to room, calling out her daughter's name with an increasingly desperate voice. "Oh, Zoe! Zoe, darling, where are you?" Evelyn shouted, her voice breaking with each call. Theodore, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, murmured to himself, "Stay calm. We have to think rationally. Where could she be? Did Vanessa take her?" After 20 minutes of fruitless searching, with the party completely disrupted and the guests in shock, Theodore made a difficult decision. With trembling hands, he grabbed his phone and dialed the police. As he explained the situation to the operator, his voice wavered between anger and despair. Evelyn, beside him, sobbed uncontrollably, clutching her husband's arm as if it were her last anchor to reality. "Claire, please, come quickly. My daughter, she's missing. And the nanny, too," Theodore pleaded into the phone. "How could this happen? How did we let this happen?" Evelyn whispered between sobs. Within minutes, the Blackwood mansion was flooded with sirens and flashing lights. Uniformed police officers spread out across the property, questioning guests and searching every room. Amid the chaos, an officer approached the couple with news. Elaine, the cook, had woken up and was asking to speak with them. With their hearts in their throats, Theodore and Evelyn rushed to the room where Elaine was being attended to by paramedics, with Ethan watching the scene anxiously. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, I saw Vanessa leaving with Zoe. She was carrying the girl, who seemed to be sleeping. When I tried to stop her, she pushed me. I hit my head and everything went dark," Elaine said, her voice weak but urgent. "I knew it. I knew something was wrong with her," Ethan said, feeling a wave of anger consume him. Then Elaine was taken for a medical checkup. "First, we will pay for all your treatment, Elaine." The ensuing chaos was a mix of frantic police activity and heated arguments between Theodore and Evelyn. As investigators set up a command post in the living room, the Blackwoods argued furiously about their next steps. Theodore insisted on an aggressive approach, wanting to use all available resources to hunt down Vanessa. Evelyn, on the other hand, feared that rash actions might put Zoe in even greater danger. "We have to offer a reward. Hire private investigators," Theodore argued, his face red with frustration. Evelyn shook her head vehemently. "No. What if that scares Vanessa? What if she harms Zoe?" "We have to let the police do their job," she countered. The argument was abruptly interrupted by the shrill sound of Theodore's cell phone. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With trembling hands, he answered, putting the phone on speaker. For a moment, there was only silence. Then an electronically distorted voice filled the air. Check your email, Mr. Blackwood, you have 1 minute. The call ended. Theodore rushed to his laptop, with Evelyn and the police officers crowding around him. He opened his inbox to find a new message with a video attachment. With his heart racing, he clicked to open it. The image that appeared on the screen made Evelyn let out a stifled scream. Zoe was there, her eyes half closed and unfocused, clearly under the influence of some drug. She was sitting in a chair in a dark, windowless room, clutching her teddy bear tightly in her arms. She is safe, for now. "Await instructions," said a mechanical voice, the same distorted voice from the phone call. Then the video ended abruptly, leaving the room in a deathly silence. "Oh my God, what have we done?" Theodore murmured, his face a mask of horror. "I'm Zoe, my baby. What are we going to do now?" Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. The Blackwood mansion, once a scene of celebration and joy, now felt like an abandoned battlefield. "There we will begin intensive searches throughout the city and thoroughly analyze the video. We will do everything in our power to bring your daughter back," said one of the police officers, after collecting the video with a promise before leaving the mansion. Theodore and Evelyn, exhausted and devastated, collapsed on the living room sofa, the deafening silence broken only by the relentless ticking of the wall clock. Ethan, who had remained quiet throughout the chaos, had red, tear-stained eyes but was shining with a fierce determination. He was holding his tablet, repeatedly reviewing the video of Vanessa going to Zoe's room days before, as well as carefully re-watching the video from the party, searching for any sign of his sister. "Dad and Mom, I think I found something. Can I show you?" he called, his voice trembling slightly. Theodore lifted his head, his weary gaze meeting his son's. "Has what? What did you find, Ethan?" he asked nervously. Ethan approached with his tablet, his fingers flying over the screen as he explained. He had revisited the security footage, focusing on the moment when Vanessa entered Zoe's room on that fateful night. "Look, the bear's eyes. They're glowing. There's something there, some kind of device," Ethan pointed out, his voice gaining confidence. Evelyn gasped, leaning in for a closer look. But how? Why, she wondered, more to herself than to the others. Ethan continued, his words coming quickly, driven by the adrenaline of the discovery. He explained that the bear, given by Vanessa, likely contained some sort of tracking or communication device. More importantly, this device had been connected to the house's internet network. "I think I can hack it. The device probably left some trace on our network. If I can access the device, maybe we can track Zoe," Ethan said, his eyes shining with a mix of fear and excitement. Theodore stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Hack, Ethan, that's illegal. We have to give this information to the police immediately. We're not that kind of people. We do what's right," he said. A heated debate erupted in the room. Evelyn, desperate for any chance to find Zoe, supported Ethan's idea. Theodore, on the other hand, feared the legal consequences and the possibility of compromising the police investigation. Ethan watched the argument, his fingers itching to start the work. "But we can't wait for police bureaucracy. Every minute counts. We can't just sit here and do nothing," Evelyn exclaimed, tears of frustration in her eyes. "What if we ruin the evidence? What if they find out we hacked and make things even worse for Zoe? What if we alert the kidnappers?" Theodore retorted, his voice tense. As the argument intensified, Ethan noticed something strange on his laptop. The lights of the house's security system began flashing erratically. His eyes widened in understanding and horror. "Look at this! Someone is hacking our home security system," he shouted, interrupting the argument. Theodore rushed to his son's side, watching helplessly as files and videos were deleted in rapid succession. Within seconds, all digital evidence, the security footage, access logs, everything was gone. The screen went black for a moment before a sinister message appeared. "Stop investigating us, Blackwoods." Ethan let out a shaky breath. "It's all gone." "My God, who are we up against?" Theodore murmured, a look of defeat on his face. The silence that had taken over the room was abruptly broken by the shrill ring of Theodore's cell phone. With trembling hands, he answered, putting the call on speaker. An electronically distorted voice filled the room, sending chills down everyone's spine. "Mr. Blackwood, I hope you're enjoying your night without little Zoe," I also hope you've understood our message and given up on trying to fight us." Theodore clenched his fists, anger bubbling in his chest. "You monster, where is my daughter?" The voice laughed coldly before continuing. "She is safe. For now. But her safety comes at a price. $10 million in cryptocurrency within the next 48 hours. Don't even think about involving the police, or you'll never see your precious little girl again. Remember, the deadline is 48 hours, not a minute more. So be quick, or else," said the kidnapper on the other end of the line before ending the call. $10 million? How are we going to get that much money so quickly?" Theodore murmured, the shock evident in his voice. He stared at the phone, hoping it would ring again, but it didn't. "Oh, it doesn't matter how, we have to pay. We have to bring our little girl back," she insisted. The chaos that followed was a storm of emotions and heated arguments. Theodore, always the calculating businessman, insisted on involving the police, arguing that giving in to the kidnappers' demands would only encourage them. Evelyn, consumed by maternal fear, pleaded for them to pay the ransom immediately, fearing the consequences of any delay. Ethan watched the argument, feeling powerless and furious that he couldn't do more to help his sister. "We can't just hand over $10 million to criminals. What if they take the money and don't return Zoe?" Theodore shouted, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Evelyn, with tears streaming down her face, couldn't believe everything that was happening. "What if we don't pay and they hurt her? I can't bear the thought of Zoe suffering because we hesitated," she retorted, terrified with worry for her daughter. As the argument intensified, the phone rang again. This time, it was the detective in charge of the case. His grave and urgent voice instantly silenced the room. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, we have new information about Vanessa. We've begun the investigation and discovered that your former nanny isn't just an ordinary kidnapper. Our investigations have revealed ties to an international child trafficking network. They typically target wealthy families, gain their trust, and then take the children." Theodore felt his legs give way, and he leaned against the wall to keep from falling. "Assault? My God, what did we do to deserve this?" he asked. Evelyn let out a stifled scream, her face as pale as wax. No, not my baby. We have to do something, Theodore." "Now," she said. After ending the call, the detective's words hung over the family like a dense cloud, making the decision even more agonizing. Theodore, always so confident and decisive, now seemed lost, torn between his instinct to protect his daughter at any cost and his fear of fueling a criminal operation that could harm other children in the future. "Maybe we can pay the ransom but work with the police secretly," Theodore suggested, his mind racing to find a solution. Evelyn shook her head vehemently. "If they find out, Zoe could, she said, barely able to finish the sentence, her body shaking with sobs. The clock on the wall seemed to mock them, each tick-tock a reminder that time was running out. The Blackwood family faced the most difficult decision of their lives, with Zoe's fate hanging by a thread. Paying the ransom wouldn't guarantee that they would get Zoe back, especially since the criminal organization could take their money and others' money from abroad and profit twice. Trusting the police might be the right thing to do, but it could also seal their daughter's terrible fate. With only 48 hours to decide, the weight of the world seemed to fall on their shoulders. "What are we going to do?" Theodore murmured, his voice broken by anguish and uncertainty. In the silence that followed, Zoe's future and the Blackwood family's remained terrifyingly uncertain. Theodore and Evelyn began frantically debating what they could do, while Ethan watched, his brain working a mile a minute. Suddenly he stood up, his eyes shining with an idea. Theodore and Evelyn exchanged looks, a mix of hope and apprehension on their faces. "Ethan, that's illegal," Theodore began, but his voice lacked conviction. Evelyn interrupted. "But it could be our only chance. We have to try, we can't wait any longer." "Can you do it, my son?" she asked, and Ethan nodded. With his parents' approval, Ethan dove into his laptop, his fingers flying over the keyboard, the screen filled with lines of code, incomprehensible to Theodore and Evelyn, who watched with a mix of fascination and fear. Hours passed, with Ethan muttering to himself, occasionally letting out exclamations of frustration or triumph. The sun was beginning to rise when he finally shouted, "I got it." "I have a signal," he said. "Where? Where are they?" Evelyn asked, leaning anxiously over her son's shoulder. Ethan pointed to a map on the screen. Here, in this port district, the signal is coming from an abandoned warehouse, Ethan informed. The initial joy of the discovery quickly gave way to a new dilemma. Theodore, though grateful for the progress, was visibly disturbed by Ethan's deep involvement. "Son, you've done an amazing job, but this is too dangerous. We can't let you get involved any further." Evelyn, on the other hand, hugged Ethan tightly, tears of gratitude in her eyes. My brilliant boy, you might have just saved your sister," she said. You can't push me away now, Dad. Zoe is my sister. I need to help," Ethan protested, his voice trembling with emotion. Theodore shook his head firmly. "It's too risky." "Leave this to the adults," he retorted. The discussion about Ethan's involvement was abruptly interrupted when the gravity of the situation hit them. "We have the location, but what do we do with this information? If we go there immediately, they might notice our arrival and harm Zoe, or do something worse, both to us and to her," Evelyn said, the fear for her daughter's life palpable in her voice. "We can't go alone. We have to call the police," Theodore said reluctantly. Evelyn paled. "But what if the kidnappers find out we notified the police? They threatened Zoe's life if we involved the authorities. They could retaliate even worse," she said. The dilemma weighed on them like a dark cloud. Calling the police might save Zoe, but it could also put her in mortal danger if the kidnappers found out. "If we don't go alone, it means we'll have to face dangerous criminals by ourselves, an equally terrifying prospect. We have little time. We can't delay making this decision. It's Zoe's life that matters," Evelyn said, torn between the options for saving her daughter. Finally, Theodore picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. "We're going to have to trust the police. It's our best chance. They are trained for this. They know how to handle the situation much better than we do," he said as he dialed. Evelyn hugged Ethan, whispering, "May God help us and protect Zoe. We have to save her. We have to keep our family safe," she prayed. With their hearts in their throats, the Blackwood family awaited the arrival of the authorities, knowing that their next actions could determine Zoe's fate. The tension was palpable, the fear of the unknown hanging over them like an unrelenting shadow. All they could do now was wait and pray that their decision wouldn't have catastrophic consequences. Minutes later, the Blackwoods were in the back seat of one of the police vehicles. The port was shrouded in a dense fog as the convoy of police cars arrived silently, with their headlights off. Evelyn and Theodore watched the officers' actions with their hearts in their throats as they positioned themselves around the abandoned warehouse. Theodore squeezed Evelyn's hand so tightly that his fingers were white, while Ethan leaned forward, his wide eyes fixed on the ominous structure ahead. "We have to go in there." "Our daughter is in there," Theodore whispered, his voice trembling with anxiety. The detective at the wheel shook his head firmly. "It's too dangerous, Mr. Blackwood. Leave this to us," he replied. A heated debate erupted between the officers and the Blackwood family. Theodore insisted on participating in the operation, arguing that he knew Zoe's voice and could help identify her quickly. Evelyn, torn between the desire to find her daughter and the fear of danger, pleaded for caution. Ethan, silent until then, suddenly spoke up. "What if we used drones? We could see inside the warehouse without risking anyone." "This isn't a video game, Ethan," Theodore reprimanded, but the detective seemed intrigued. "Actually, the boy might have a point," the officer murmured, picking up his radio. As the police discussed Ethan's suggestion, a tense silence fell over the group. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the air, followed by muffled screams. Everyone froze, their eyes fixed on the warehouse. Then, the unmistakable crack of gunfire pierced the night, followed by terrified screams of children. "Zoe!" Evelyn screamed, trying to open the car door. Theodore held her back, his own face pale with terror. "All units, move in now," the detective shouted into his radio as chaos erupted around them. What followed was a scene of pure chaos. Armed police officers rushed towards the warehouse, shouts and more gunfire echoing in the air. The Blackwoods, disobeying all orders, got out of the car and ran toward the building. Theodore led the way, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. As they entered the warehouse, the scene that greeted them was a nightmare. Children crying, criminals trying to flee, police shouting orders. In the midst of the chaos, Theodore saw a flash of blonde hair. "Zoe!" he shouted, running towards his daughter. But then he saw Vanessa, dragging Zoe towards a side exit that led to the dock. Theodore took off in pursuit, ignoring Evelyn's shouts as she tried to shield Ethan with her own body. The gunshots still echoed through the warehouse. He sprinted down the dock, seeing Vanessa pulling Zoe towards a boat that was docked. His mind raced, calculating distances, assessing risks. If I jump onto the boat, I can catch Vanessa. But what if she uses Zoe as a shield, he thought. Stop right now, Vanessa. Let my daughter go, Theodore shouted, his voice hoarse with desperation. Vanessa turned, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. Try to stay where you are, or I'll throw her into the water, she threatened, holding Zoe tightly in her arms. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. Theodore saw Zoe, her eyes wide with fear, silently pleading for help. He saw Vanessa, her hand gripping Zoe's arm with brutal force, and he saw the dark, churning water of the harbor, ready to swallow anyone who fell into it. Theodore took a step forward, his mind racing through all the possibilities. Think, Theodore, think, he scolded himself internally. At that exact moment, a gunshot rang out. Theodore watched, as if in slow motion. Vanessa staggered backward, pulling Zoe with her. The two figures, one small and one large, fell into the water with a deafening splash. "Oh, Zoe! My daughter!" Theodore screamed, running to the edge of the dock. He frantically searched the dark water, looking for any sign of movement. But the surface of the water remained still, reflecting the flashing lights of the police cars, revealing nothing of the fate of his precious daughter or her captor. Without a second's hesitation, Theodore dove into the dark, icy waters of the harbor. The salty water stung his eyes as he frantically searched for any sign of Zoe or Vanessa. The weight of his clothes pulled him down, but adrenaline and desperation kept him moving. His lungs burned, begging for air, but he refused to surface without his daughter. "Zoe, where are you, my daughter?" he screamed in his mind, his eyes scanning the murky darkness. At that moment, he glimpsed a golden glow to his right, Zoe's hair. With a powerful thrust, Theodore swam towards the golden reflection. As he got closer, he could see Zoe, unconscious, being dragged by the current. Vanessa was nearby, struggling to keep her head above water with one hand, while holding on to Zoe with the other. Their eyes met for a brief moment, filled with fear and determination. Theodore reached Zoe first, pulling her towards him. Vanessa, seeing her hostage slip away, tried to grab the girl again. For one terrifying moment, Zoe was caught between them, pulled in two directions. "I'll let her go." "It's over, Vanessa," Theodore shouted, his voice muffled by the water. Vanessa looked at him, then at Zoe, and finally at the distant surface. With one last look of defiance, she let go of Zoe and began swimming away. Theodore didn't waste any time. With Zoe safe in his arms, he swam with all his strength towards the surface. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of Zoe and his own soaked clothes threatening to drag him back to the depths. But a father's love and pure determination pushed him forward. Finally, they broke through the surface. Theodore gasped, desperately pulling air into his burning lungs. Zoe remained motionless in his arms. "Help, over here! I need help!" he shouted with all the strength he had left. Within seconds, strong hands pulled them onto the dock. Paramedics rushed to attend to Zoe, while Evelyn threw herself into Theodore's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan was right behind them, his eyes wide with fear and relief. "She's not breathing," a paramedic shouted, immediately beginning CPR on Zoe. Theodore felt his world collapse. "Please, God, don't take her from us." "Not like this," he murmured. Seconds dragged on like hours as the paramedic worked tirelessly. The Blackwood family watched in terrified silence, their hopes hanging by a thread. Suddenly, Zoe coughed, expelling water from her lungs. Her eyes slowly opened, confused and scared. "Daddy? Mommy, Ethan?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Theodore wrapped her in his arms, tears of relief streaming down his face. "I'm here, my love. We're all here." "You're safe now," he said, visibly shaken. As the family gathered in an emotional embrace, police officers scoured the area for Vanessa. But she had disappeared into the night, leaving behind only unanswered questions and the echo of her crime. "Is it over? Is it really over?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly. Theodore looked at his family, gathered and safe, and then at the dark waters of the harbor. Yes, my son, it's over. Weeks after the terrible incident at the harbor, the Blackwood Mansion's living room was bathed in the golden light of sunset. Zoe played happily with her new puppy, while Ethan typed on his laptop, occasionally casting protective glances at his sister. Evelyn arranged some flowers in a vase, her serene face reflecting the peace that had finally returned to their home. Theodore entered the room, clearing his throat softly to get everyone's attention. "Family," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "We've been through something none of us ever imagined facing. Today I want to talk about it and about our future." He turned to Ethan, his eyes shining. "Son, I owe you an apology. From the start, you sensed that something was wrong with Vanessa, and I didn't listen. My pride and arrogance almost cost your sister's life. Your insight and skills were crucial in saving Zoe. You showed a maturity that makes me not only proud but humble. Please forgive me, my son. I know now how important it is to listen to our own children," he said, making Ethan emotional before turning to his wife. "Evelyn, your strength during this ordeal was inspiring. Zoe, my little warrior, your bravery leaves me speechless. As a family, we faced the unimaginable and came out stronger. We've learned about trust, vigilance, and the importance of valuing each other. From today on, we will strengthen our bonds. We will have regular family dinners, create spaces for open and honest conversations. The trauma we experienced will leave scars, but they will remind us of the strength we discovered together. We won't live in fear, but we will use this experience to become more united." As Theodore spoke, Evelyn stepped closer, wrapping him in a hug. Ethan closed his laptop and moved to join them. Zoe, sensing the emotion in the air, ran into her father's arms, her puppy at her heels. "There's one more thing," Theodore said, a smile forming on his lips. "I received a call from the detective today. Vanessa and her gang have all been captured and indicted. The international operation they dismantled led to the release of hundreds of children. Families around the world are being reunited right now, just like ours," he said. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Evelyn let out a joyful sob, hugging Zoe tightly. Ethan smiled. A visible weight lifted from his shoulders. "Am I really safe?" Zoe asked, her voice small but hopeful. Theodore knelt down to her eye level. "Yes, sweetheart, you are. This is the end of that nightmare, but it's also a new beginning for us," he said. In the days and weeks that followed, the Blackwoods kept their promises. Family dinners became a sacred ritual, filled with laughter and lively conversations. Ethan, recognized for his crucial role, was encouraged to further develop his skills in technology, with the full support of his parents. Zoe, though still occasionally haunted by nightmares, found comfort in the constant presence of her family and her loyal canine companion. Elaine, after fully recovering in the hospital, returned to the Blackwood Mansion with a warm reception from the family. Theodore, recognizing her loyalty and courage during the crisis, promoted her from cook to housekeeper. Now, Elaine oversaw not just the kitchen but all aspects of the mansion's operations. Her calm and maternal presence brought an added sense of security and comfort to everyone, especially to Zoe, who found in Elaine a confidant and a source of wisdom. With her new position, Elaine became an even more integral part of the Blackwoods' lives. Her gentle smile and quiet strength a constant reminder that the family had not only survived but grown stronger through their ordeal. The Blackwood Mansion, once a symbol of status and success, transformed into a true home filled with love, understanding, and mutual respect. The terrible experience they had faced, though painful, served as a catalyst for a profound transformation, not just in their lives, but in their hearts. As the sun set that evening, the Blackwood family gathered in the garden, arms intertwined, looking out at the horizon. The future, once uncertain and frightening, now shone with promise and hope. Together, they had faced the worst and emerged stronger, united by love and gratitude for the second chance they had been given. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing you exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We greatly appreciate having you with us. Now you can click on the links that are appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, full of valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there!